I had never even heard of God of War Betrayal until relatively recently, if you are like me and you are unfamiliar with the game. It is a God of War action platformer spin-off, developed for mobile phones and released back in 2007, the same year as God of War 2, and it turns out that it is a fascinating little relic of its time. Nowadays, I think mobile gaming has become kind of sterilized and even a little grotesque. Like every mobile game feels basically the same. They are all hyper-monetized, filled with little grubby schemes designed to squeeze as much money out of players as possible, with timers and boosters and dailies and advertisements and gacha and pseudo-gambling and big anime boobies bouncing all over the place. Betrayal was created in a very different mobile gaming ecosystem than the one we see today. This was at a time when developers were still trying to create console-like single-player, unmonetized gaming experiences on mobile platforms, but with far more limited technology than what is available today. Which is how you end up with something like Betrayal, a mobile side-scrolling action platformer spin-off of a popular franchise. This game is tiny in scale, like microscopic. You can finish it in less than 2 hours. The visuals are composed of a mix of simple character sprites and pixel art backgrounds, though I did find a lot of the animation work here to be really impressive. Watch this finisher move when Kratos kills a Minotaur. He punctures the Minotaur's arms with his dual blades, then cinematically leaps backwards in slow motion while whipping his chains, and then he rips the Minotaur's arms out of its sockets. Holy crap, and it is not over yet. Next, Kratos knocks the Minotaur to the ground, tears its head off, and then holds the head up in the air as he rips the skull in half in a shower of pixelated blood. This kill animation is ridiculous and over the top and bloody, and I love it. There is another animation where he will pick up a soldier and just rip their entire body in half. And the animations for the chainsword attacks look really good too. A lot of movement, very fast and fluid and intricate. It does a great job reproducing the attack animations from the 3D games in pixel form. But again, very small in scale. This version of Kratos only has a single ground combo that he repeats over and over again, and an even simpler single aerial combo. The combat is extremely simple and stiff. You basically just mash the attack button until everything on screen dies. There is no dodge of any kind, though there is a fairly useless block ability. You can use magic, but cycling through the menu to reach and then activate your spell is so slow and awkward that you are almost always better off spending that time mashing away on the attack button instead. There are only 5 enemy types, though 2 different boss fights. All of the environments are basically the same. There is almost no audio whatsoever outside of the main theme on the title screen. No background music, barely any sound effects at all. You are basically playing in total silence, except for the occasional sword sound effect, which was very jarring for me the first time I played. I thought maybe my emulator was not functioning properly or something, but no, there just is not any audio in this game. The controls are stiff and clunky because of course they are. It had to be controlled using a flip phone button layout, which was already awkward and does not translate well to keyboard controls very well. And with all of that said, I still think God of War Betrayal is probably better than any mobile game released in the last year, because at least it was trying to be an actual video game with actual gameplay. Mobile games today are basically just the video game equivalent of psychoshock therapy, except instead of just zapping your brain cells, they zap your bank account over and over again too. There is an integrity to God of War Betrayal, as an art form, as an example of craft. It feels like it was created by artists who cared about something more than just how much money they could squeeze out of their players. They were trying to make something cool, even if they were severely limited by the technology. And in that respect, I have discovered that Betrayal is only one of many, because for the past couple months I have been exploring these old Java platform mobile gaming libraries, and there are actually quite a few interesting little unique forgotten gems to be found here. There was a Silent Hill mobile game called Silent Hill Orphan. It is an old-school retro-style first-person point-and-click horror game where you explore this creepy abandoned orphanage, collecting items, solving convoluted puzzles, slowly uncovering the history of the orphanage. It's really cool. I found several Resident Evil games with a wide variety of different gameplay styles. Isometric games, some first-person games, even one fully 3D game that tried to replicate the gameplay of the console titles pretty closely. Very ambitious considering the technology available to them. And probably the most interesting old Java game I've played in the last couple weeks is Doom RPG. This is a recreation of the original Doom game, but instead of a first-person shooter, it is a first-person turn-based role-playing game. It plays a bit like those old-school first-person dungeon crawlers that used to be really common on PC. This is one of the few old Java mobile games that I have found that feels like it was actually made for the mobile platform. Like a lot of these other games, including Betrayal, feel like console games that were squeezed down to fit into a flip phone, which leads to some jank and awkwardness. But Doom RPG feels like it was actually designed not only to fit within the limitations of the platform, but actually to excel within those limitations. The turn-based combat and 90-degree first-person movement work perfectly with these clunky-ass stupid flip phone controls. And moreover, it is taking the source material and making a new and original experience out of that source material. It is a different kind of Doom game, with a much greater focus on narrative and exploration. It is shockingly good. If you have any interest, you should go download an emulator and try playing a few of these games for yourself. It is just a totally different epoch of mobile gaming. I felt a bit like a video game archaeologist while I was digging through all these old games. But let's talk more about God of War Betrayal. When I first played Betrayal just a couple months ago, I had no idea what to expect. It is not officially available anywhere anymore, so you do have to jump through some hoops in order to download it. And when I did get it running, my first reaction was that this game sucks. It is a clunky piece of crap. The character is slow, the platforming is bizarre. As I mentioned earlier, there is practically no audio. The whole game is made up of a little emasculated, crude sprite of Kratos, swinging his pixelated blades around in tragic silence. However, after spending a few weeks exploring all of these other old mobile games, and getting a much better understanding of the technology available to the developers and the context it was developed in, I actually think God of War Betrayal is a pretty impressive little artifact of its era. The thing is, developing a real-time action platformer that actually works on this platform must have been very, very difficult. The fact that Betrayal functions at all is impressive. The combat system is extremely simplistic, but it works. The platforming is clunky as hell, but it is possible to navigate this little angry Kratos sprite through some fairly elaborate spinning blade trap and platform sequences. As I've already said, the animations are actually very well done, the sprite work is good, the background pixel art is clean and detailed. I'm not going to tell you that Betrayal is fun to play, but god damn it, it is playable. Okay, so let's run through the whole game from start to finish. And it does have an actual story. I think it might even still be canon, though I have never been very clear on the canon status of all these side materials in the God of War series. Anyway, the story of God of War Betrayal is set in between God of War 1 and 2. Kratos, as the newly minted God of War, is in the middle of his bloody conquest of Greece, as described in the opening of God of War 2. And so the story of Betrayal is doing something very common in the extended God of War narrative universe. It is trying to expand on a plot point that only gets briefly mentioned in the primary trilogy. I will say up front, I don't think the story here is very good. Betrayal tries to explain the conflict between Kratos and Zeus that we see at the start of God of War 2, but that conflict was already explained in that game. Kratos' campaign of conquest was creating chaos in Greece. The other gods wanted nothing to do with him. His behavior was openly antagonistic towards Olympus. Zeus was overcome by paranoia and a fear of losing his power. It already made perfect sense. It is trying to explain things that were already adequately explained. It is, simply put, unnecessary. In the first level, Kratos is leading his Spartan warriors on an invasion of some unnamed Greek city. Something I thought was kind of cool about the game is that it is at least slightly non-linear. You are rewarded for going off the beaten path and exploring. Just like in the main series, you can find extra experience points to spend on weapon and ability upgrades, or you can find Gorgon Eyes and Phoenix Feathers to upgrade your health and magic bars. And another thing the developers included from the main series are random innocent civilians flailing around who have absolutely no sense of self-preservation whatsoever, and have a habit of running directly into Kratos' blades, which is especially fun in this game because when they are killed, their sprites immediately dissolve into a flat soup of bloody pixelated flesh. It is gruesome and silly. Anyway, while enjoying himself slaughtering the innocent civilians and defenders of this unnamed city for no reason at all, Kratos is attacked by Argos, a giant created by Hera, the wife of Zeus, which was apparently sent by the gods to stop Kratos. This begins an awkward little clunky boss battle, and here I will talk a little more about the combat system. As I said earlier, it is extremely simple. Kratos only really has the one combo that he repeats over and over again. However, one very irritating aspect of this combo is that with every single attack, Kratos' sprite moves forward, and not just a little bit, but a lot. If you mash the attack button, he will skate right across the screen. This is annoying because that means he is going to be constantly moving closer and closer to the enemies you are trying to defeat. And after a full combo, Kratos often ends up jamming himself in the middle of a whole group of enemies, who then all start spamming their own attacks at the same time, which can just destroy your entire health bar in seconds. So, especially as you get to the later parts of the game, where you are facing off against larger and larger groups of enemies in smaller and smaller spaces, it is almost never worth it to actually carry out a full combo. Instead, what I discovered is that the best strategy is to hit the attack button just 2 or 3 times, and then turn around and run away, and then turn back again and do it again, and repeat this for a few minutes until all the enemies are dead, which is what you will see me doing in this first boss battle. And if there happen to be enemies spawning on either side of you, then you are screwed. You are about to be triple penetrated from angles you did not even know penetration was possible from, which is why it is super cool that the final boss battle of the game involves infinite respawning enemies from both sides of the screen. Very annoying. The running back and forth is a tedious and not very fun way to do battles. I really wish either that Kratos did not move forward during combos, or if there was a dodge mechanic, or if the block was a bit less useless, or maybe if the magic was easier to use. Anyway, the point is the combat system is functional and the animations are cool, but otherwise, not great. The game will frequently trap you in a room and force you to kill a certain number of respawning enemies before you are allowed to move on, and these sections always felt a bit slow and irritating to me. Remember that sick-ass Minotaur kill finisher I showed you earlier? The one where Kratos leaps backward in slow motion before ripping the monster's arm off? Well, if at any point during that long animation, Kratos' sprite touches the geometry of the level, like if his head hits the ceiling or his back hits the wall, the animation is immediately interrupted and does no damage whatsoever. And because so many of the combat encounters take place in cramped quarters, that makes the finishing moves not only useless, but actively harmful. So it is kind of a mess. The game has a very generous checkpoint system though, where if you die, you don't even really lose any progress. You do get knocked back a little bit into the level, but when you respawn, any enemies you killed in a previous run remain dead, and puzzles you solve remain solved. So all you have to do is platform back to where you died. Even if you are killed during a boss fight, it does not seem like the boss's health actually regenerates at all. So you can die as many times as you want, and just keep throwing yourself headfirst back into the battle, and eventually, through simple attrition, you will always come out ahead. There is a secondary game mode called Arena, where all you do is kill endlessly respawning waves of enemies. And I guess it is cool that the developers included a secondary game mode, but man, who in the world could possibly enjoy this combat system enough to want to do that? To my surprise, I actually found the platforming in the game to be a lot more enjoyable than the combat. The platforming here reminds me, more than anything, of those old side-scrolling Prince of Persia games from back in the 90s. It is very slow, very methodical, focused around navigating traps. They are definitely more than a little clunky, but still more fun than the combat. Now let's get back to the story. While invading the city, Kratos is attacked multiple times by the Argos, and each time he defeats it, it runs away. Except for the last encounter, when he traps it down in the sewer, and the Argos is then killed by a shadowy assassin who appears to be using the same kind of weapon as Kratos. The suggestion is that the assassin is attempting to frame Kratos for the murder of Argos, which will then incite the anger of the Olympians against him, which explains the conflict between him and Olympus at the beginning of God of War 2. Besides being completely unnecessary, this plot point is also stupid, because there is no need to frame Kratos for the murder of Argos. Kratos gladly would have done that on his own. He literally tries to do so multiple times right here and fails, as the creature flees before he can land the final hit. Kratos is the absolute last character in the entire history of video games who you need to frame for murder. He is already a murderer. It is like a key part of his character. He murders constantly, of his own free will. Both this game and God of War 2 open with him invading and destroying entire cities. In the gameplay, you slaughter random innocent civilians just for the hell of it. It would be like if Van Helsing tried to stop Dracula by framing the vampire for shoplifting tomato juice from the supermarket in order to turn public opinion against him. Like, no shit, Sherlock. He has done far worse than this already. He has killed hundreds if not thousands of people. But whatever. In order to clear his name and discover who exactly is plotting against him, Kratos spends the rest of the game chasing the assassin through the ruins of the war-torn city, while Hades sends a horde of undead monsters to slow him down, I guess suggesting that the god of the underworld is in on the plot. Another silly part of this game's story is how totally useless the warriors of Sparta are. As Kratos explores the city, the Spartans get themselves into trouble over and over again. There are so many levels that open with these supposedly elite warriors crying out to their leader, "Oh no, Kratos, help us, help us!" Like when the Minotaurs first appear, the Spartans cry out, "Oh my god, Minotaurs, the Minotaurs! We're all freaking screwed! Run away, run away!" It is really funny to me. Anyway, so the entire rest of the game is made up of chasing the shadowy assassin across the city. The game ends with the arrival of Charax, the messenger of the gods, who was sent by Zeus with a warning, "Stop fighting, or else." To the surprise of absolutely no one, Kratos does not heed this warning. A very annoying final boss battle against Caryx ensues, which ends with the Divine Messenger's death, and Kratos' realization that Zeus will soon strike back, setting up the events of God of War 2. The identity of the mysterious assassin is never revealed. He is apparently left unscathed at the end of the game, one of the only enemies of Kratos in the entire series, who survives an encounter with the Ghost of Sparta. The assassin escapes before Kratos ever catches up with him. It is a bizarre plot hole and a very abrupt and unsatisfying conclusion to the game. However, according to this YouTube comment, on the video God of War's Impressive Java Phone Spin-Off, published by a channel called Mini-Me, this guy claims to have been the director of God of War Betrayal, and in his comment he claims that Betrayal was intended to be only the first in a series of God of War mobile games, and eventually it would be revealed that the assassin was Deimos, Kratos' long-lost brother. If this is true, then presumably this plot point was absorbed into Ghost of Sparta's storyline instead. And I gotta say, this actually sounds like a much more interesting portrayal of Deimos than the one we eventually got. One of my personal disappointments with Ghost of Sparta's story is how little screen time Deimos has in the game. He does not appear until the very end, which means he has very little time for his character or his relationship with Kratos to be developed. A game focused entirely around multiple encounters with a free-roaming and antagonistic Deimos, with his own story and his own goals, sounds like it has a lot of potential. But that is a discussion for another day, so I do not think I can call God of War Betrayal a good game. It is just so limited by the technology, the controls and movement are clunky, the scale is tiny, the silent audio is really unappealing, and the story is just left totally unresolved at the end. However, with all that said, it is still pretty impressive considering the very restrictive limitations the developers were working within. I do not think it was easy to make a God of War game on a flip phone, and it is a shame that those sequels never happened, because with a bit of refinement, a more polished combat system, a bit more variety in enemy type and environment and traps, this project did have potential. If nothing else, God of War Betrayal is a cool little relic of a now totally vanished era in mobile gaming history. There are so many games like Betrayal and Doom RPG and Silent Hill Orphan that have been completely forgotten and are basically just lost media at this point. This is the only true spin-off that was ever developed in the whole history of the God of War franchise, and there will probably never be another, which is too bad, because God of War's style of gameplay actually would lend itself pretty well to action platformer design. The fast-paced, fluid, acrobatic combat, the elaborate platforming sections involving navigating long sequences of traps, the puzzles, the exploration, the fantastical, mysterious, dangerous, dark fantasy settings. After playing Betrayal, I cannot help but imagine what a modern equivalent might look like. A big-budget Metroidvania God of War game in the style of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown or Metroid Dread. Like, man, that could be so freaking cool. But it will never happen. This retrospective series is progressing chronologically through the series, so my next video should be on Chains of Olympus, the first PSP game. However, I have been doing nothing but God of War videos for about 4 months straight now, and to be honest, I'm starting to get a bit burned out. So I am going to take a break from the series and focus on something else for a little while. I don't know what yet, but something else. In a couple months, I will return with a retrospective of God of War Chains of Olympus, which has one of my all-time favorite villains in the whole series, Persephone. So, see you then.